map bias leading to teams selecting particular races very consistently for particular maps. Certainly did in the choice of 2 Terran players for Rush Hour 3. I think this is also a reasonably good map for Terran, but I'm not sure. Oh, those mines can do a lot of damage to those SCVs if they go off. They do go off, but the SCVs are out of range in time. But now, Fantasy is in there with his vultures and the tank goes down, so Fantasy only has that 1 Goliath, and he's okay. Or C only has the 1 Goliath, but now C is bringing back more forces. A lot of mines back there, so he ought to clear those quickly, but great job by Fantasy. He has those vultures now in the back, and getting a lot of harassment done with a very small group of vultures. So, good job there. That contain is still sitting up on that ridge, but it's pretty empty at this point. Fantasy is still able to get around it at will, and doesn't really need to push up that ridge anyway. Now he is pushing, though, and we'll see. I think he'll be able to break here. He has a lot of vultures laying mines, and we'll see when those mines go off. Yeah, oh, just devastating that siege line. Great mine placement by Fantasy. And now Fantasy's pushing up with more forces. Mine taking out a Goliath. And those raids are going to take out that last tank. It looks like they more or less traded forces there. 1 tank apiece. 2nd tank coming up for C. So C is, for whatever reason, committing to holding on to this contain a little bit. Barracks going down for C. That's going to be a slight setback, but nothing major. Six factories down now for C. And if they're for Fantasy, sorry, and if they're showing everything for C, he only has 3 factories down. So I assume he must have more somewhere else. Otherwise, he's way behind on production capacity. Barracks and a starport going down, and it looks like C does not have any other factories. I guess that's just because he got his secondary up later, so he hasn't been able to start macroing off it yet, but he's going to need to wait until he gets that barracks down, so he's going to be at a big macro disadvantage for a little while coming up, unless he has more factories that we haven't seen. So we'll see how he's able to hold this off, and whether Fantasy senses this vulnerability and starts pushing. Fantasy does have forces moving up, 3 tanks and a bunch of vultures, and if he's pumping from all 6 of those factories, he'll be able to augment that force very quickly. 2 starports now for C, so C's going to try to get out a lot of raids. And that will be a decent counter because Fantasy doesn't have any anti-air up at the moment, but he may have put down an armory, and even if he hasn't, it won't take him too long to do that. Doesn't look like those starports are pumping yet, though, so C's taking so much economic damage from those that vulture harassment that he's just struggling to keep his head above water, I think. And you can see cutting SCV production at the natural in order to get forces out to hold off this push. Tank being caught there by a couple of vultures, and C's just leaving it siege. Another tank comes out, and it'll probably be able to take out those vultures in time. We'll see, though. Those vultures might be able to... Oh, and now another push coming out of the middle, and a lot of mines going down. They're going to take out 2 of C's tanks. And the 3rd tank does go down to shelling from that ridge. So Fantasy's slowly pushing out into the middle. I don't think he's moving fast enough, though, to really exploit this window of vulnerability for C. I think C will be able to get the forces out to hold his own ridgeline before Fantasy gets there. I'm not sure, maybe C does have more factories in the background, because it doesn't seem like Fantasy's got that much of a macro advantage right now. C seems to be keeping close to at par with him in terms of forces. Now Fantasy is putting down that 3rd base in the bottom right. So he's going to try to claim an economic advantage. And if he does that, C will have to respond in some way. It looks like C is sending out an SCV to the top left, you can see in the minimap. So C may be putting down his own tertiary to counter. Several raids out for C. No cloaking yet, so it remains to be seen how effective they are. Fantasy's cloaked raid. There's at least 1 left. There might be more. Oh man, 1 mine taking out 2 tanks. Great play there by Fantasy. But even a single cloaked wraith can deal some damage to those uncloaked wraiths, or at least force C to expend a lot of comsat. Wraiths coming into action, and they are pushing Fantasy back a little bit. They take out one tank. And it looks like Fantasy maybe didn't anticipate these Wraiths. He doesn't have any anti-air out yet. So it'll be a little while before he has Goliaths out. And this maybe... C has a lot of Wraiths now. C has a total of 6 Wraiths, it looks like. And C may be able to mount a little bit of a push here, because he's taking out a number of tanks. SCV's coming off to repair, but... If C can take out those SCVs, he'll be on his way towards repairing the damage that was done to him by Fantasy's earlier harassment. So, C making a very smart tech switch. Usually this late switch into Wraiths isn't terribly effective, but he did catch Fantasy with his pants down, really. Now a couple of Goliaths out, and they are going to chase the Wraiths away. Oh, but then more Wraiths coming up, and they chase the Goliaths back. And Barracks goes down, so Fantasy's going to have to wait a little bit to get more factories up, which he will want to do shortly once he gets that third base up and running. Lots of tanks going down to these Wraiths. Very good job by C of picking off everything he can find, and this expansion is just totally naked. So if C goes in with those Wraiths now, C's just hesitating there, and that's... man, I don't know if he doesn't know that base is there, but if he went in now, he could pick off a lot of SCVs. First person view now for C. Interestingly, it looks like C's chosen to go with in-game colors rather than teal and red, which is normally what you see on these first person views. I don't actually know if that is interesting, but it's a little bit unusual anyway. But I think they were showing that he hasn't scouted that bottom right base, I think. So that may explain why he didn't go down there with those Wraiths. One Wraith gets picked off at low health. Both players settling into siege lines now across the middle of the map. And it looks like C is going to claim that third base finally, but he is still significantly behind Fantasy, I think. The harassment he did with those Wraiths did something, but oh, C built another command center in his natural, and C's going to float it out, so C actually might take an economic advantage if he can hold on for a little bit longer, because he'll have 4 bases to 3 very shortly. And I don't know if Fantasy's been putting out another base. A bunch of Goliaths out now, warning away those Wraiths, but the Wraiths have done their work and bought C time to really get back in this game and get his macro up and running again. There may be a command center going down there. Yeah, okay, so there is a command center, and Fantasy will be evening up the base count shortly. Science facility going down now, probably just for level 2 upgrades. We did see earlier in this set battle cruisers in the game between Light and Kanata, but I don't think this game is anywhere near the point where those are coming out yet. And wow, Valkyries out for Fantasy. Fantasy loves his Valkyries, as we know from watching him play TVZ. But I don't know if I've ever seen Valkyries in a TVT before. That's a really odd play. I mean, there are a lot of Wraiths out for C, but it seems like those Goliaths were doing a reasonably adequate job of countering them. There weren't enough Wraiths to really take on that Goliath force, so I guess Fantasy just felt like this game needed some Valkyries and decided to build them. So we'll see if they end up coming into action against these Wraiths. C does have a decent number of Goliaths out on the ground, so they'll be able to do damage to those Valkyries if the Valkyries do engage. It looks like the Valkyries are coming out now, 3 of them. And they may just try to run in. Oh, and the Wraiths are a little bit out of position. There's no Goliath support behind them, so those Valkyries... Oh, and the Wraiths are running right over the Valkyries, so... Or not over the Valkyries, over the Goliaths, so it looks like the Valkyries might be almost superfluous. A lot of those Wraiths already have gone down. And I think sort of a waste of resources on those on those Valkyries, but maybe not, because C's now putting down a control tower, so C may be committing to Wraiths a little bit more than it looked like. He still isn't pumping Wraiths out of that other starport, though. So I'm not sure what that control tower is for. It's probably for dropships, I would imagine. Though we're not seeing a control tower at the other starport. I think it's got to be for dropships. I guess the Valkyries could, in principle, be an effective way to counter drop tech, though. We'll see if Fantasy tries to use them that way. That's something we've never seen before, but there's no reason it couldn't work in principle. A good drop here coming down on the left side, but there's a lot of tanks sieged up on that ridgeline. I think C will be able to prevent this force from pressing out very far from its landing zone. Now, a little force from C over on this left side, and it's going to try to set up a siege line here.